the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 197, being recorded on Thursday, January 8th, 2026. The sun is going down, the evening is upon us. It's a little chilly out, or at least it's chillier in here than it is out there, at least from when I was out there about an hour or so ago. Definitely want to be wearing your jackets, but don't got to layer up too much. It's nothing too egregious outside. Actually, truthfully, probably could have just went out there with maybe a long sleeve or something. Would have been fine. But definitely plenty of snow. We got some gnarly ice yesterday. Definitely had to be very careful driving. You just can feel that. You can feel that as you're driving. Just the slickness of the road, especially as if there's patches of ice you don't even see, and I'm driving like a maniac. It's just taking it slow, getting to where you need to get to in one piece. If you need to get there, like if you're going to work or you have an appointment or something like that, you just got to get to. Then just definitely be vigilant, keep an eye out, and if you don't have to, then don't take on any unnecessary risks. It kind of goes without saying. But anyways, yeah, the snow's out. The ice is basically gone. The snow is actually practically melting at this point. You can definitely start seeing patches of grass out there, and but it's a great sight to see. Anyways, the view I'm looking at, I got a woodsy kind of area, plenty of snow there. The cats love looking out the window. It's great. With the sun going down, it really kind of lends itself to the atmosphere of the room. There's plenty of films to catch up on here. There's so much to do, and I'm gonna definitely take the opportunity to get on top of that after recording this. But yeah, 2026 is starting out solid, man. I tell you, there's just so many films to see already. I was saying that last weekend I had seen two new releases theatrically, and one of them was very good. It was actually excellent, I would say. A movie called The Plague that I won't talk about, but I would definitely recommend should you come across it. Yeah, just looking at this weekend and the upcoming weekends, and there's a lot to see, and we're gonna definitely try to do our best to see those films and stay on top of it, because I am happy to say that I've completed my 2025 watches, at least my 2025 films that I wanted to watch. I didn't get to everything. There's some that are just unavailable. I mentioned before, a couple films that are currently unavailable, or there were some that I wasn't able to access. So it's by no means a definitive list. I don't think any list can really be definitive if it's going to be changing like that over time, or your opinions change over time, or maybe you feel strongly about a film at one point and then not as strongly later on, whether it be positively or negatively. But I thought, I mentioned it before, but I was going to go through, I'm not going to talk about all these, obviously, I'm just, because it was just too many to talk about in the time here. But I have two lists here, which are my 50 favorite films of 2025 and the 25 of 2025 short list of the films that didn't quite make my 50 favorites, but are 25 films that I do like quite a bit enough to put them in this category. I'm gonna just run through these titles here. This is solely meant so if you're listening and you're unfamiliar with the title, or the title sounds interesting, you can do your own research and look that film up and see if it's something that you would be interested in. So I'm gonna run on through these, and starting off with my 50 favorites of 2025 in alphabetical order. Let's see here. We have 28 Years Later, The Accident, Architecton, Ballad of a Small Player, The Ballad of Wallace Island, Blue Moon, Bring Them Down, The Brutalist, Begonia, Caught Stealing, Christie, Die My Love, East of Wall, Eddington, Ephus, Familiar Touch, Final Destination Bloodlines, Friendship, Grand Tour, Hamnet, Hard Truths, The History of Sound, It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley, It Was Just an Accident, Jane Austen Wrecked My Life, Jay Kelly, Magazine Dreams, The Mastermind, Misericordia, My Mom Jane, The Naked Gun, A Nice Indian Boy, Nickel Boys, Nanas, Nouvelle Vague, Presence, Rebuilding, The Roses, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, Sentimental Value, She Rides Shotgun, Sirat, The Smashing Machine, Splitsville, The Surfer, Suspended Time, Universal Language, Urchin, Warfare, and Weapons. And as for my 25 of 25 shortlist, we have Americana, Anaconda, Ballerina, Black Bag, F1, Good Boy, The Ice Tower, Janice Ian Breaking Silence, The Last Showgirl, Left-Handed Girl, A Little Prayer, Lurker, Megadoc, Nobody 2, Novocaine, Roofman, Sacramento, The Secret Agent, Sketch, Sunfish, and Other Stories on Green Lake, Superboys of Malajon, Tendaberry, Thank You Very Much, The Ugly Stepsister, and Viet and Nam. It's like 75 films right there. Some mainstream, some obscure, but all 75 films I do. Well, of course I do like. That's a redundant thing to say, but overall impressions of the year. I mean, it's just a quality lineup of films. It's kind of when you're putting really good films together on a list, it's going to be easy to kind of say, well, it was a good year. But I'd have to kind of weigh that against the films that I wasn't a fan of. I didn't really see a whole ton this year that I'm like, man, that was like terrible. I think I can think of a couple that I won't mention, but I could say maybe like one, two, three, maybe just three that I thought. Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry, five. Well, if we're talking about fictional films, I saw there were two documentaries I thought were terrible, but three feature films, fiction, that I thought were terrible as well. But nothing god awful. I remember the last god awful film I saw, and they don't come too often. But it's almost like wow, you did it. You made something god awful. And when I say god awful, I'm being hyperbolic. But when it gets to that point, then I start to evaluate whether or not it's one of the worst films I've ever seen, because I don't have a whole lot of films. I don't. They're not even films. I don't have a whole lot of movies, because that's what they are. They're dumb. They're dumb populist films. Movies. Gosh, contradicting myself. But they don't come around too often. I see plenty of terrible, terrible movies. I see plenty of terrible films that I'm like, whatever. It's just bad. It's not often you see like where you can say, man, that was one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's been a couple of years, and what year was that? 23, I think. But maybe I have like five or six that I can say like, yeah, that's one of the worst movies that I've ever seen. Um, so that's good. Hey, if I don't see a movie a year that I call one of the worst ever, then I think that's pretty good. Because even the films this year that I really didn't like, that I thought were terrible, are they some of the worst ever? No, absolutely not. I just really didn't like them. But of course, even with those films, even films that I think are some of the worst I've ever seen, I will, if somebody came to me and asked, should I see this film? Should I see this movie? Should I see whatever? I will say, if you want to see it, if it intrigues you, if you are interested in it, I don't want to turn you away, because somebody is going to get something else out of something that I may not have, positively or negatively. I can recommend a film that I love, that I like, try to recommend to somebody's tastes, and if they don't like it, then that's their prerogative. I will not try, whatever. It's what it is. But anyways, with that said, yeah. So yeah, 2025, man. I've been thinking a lot about 28 years later again. I don't remember when I think I last talked about it. Besides mentioning it last week, and And it's funny. It's on the mind because the new film is coming out at the time of recording of this recording. It's coming out next week. I'm definitely looking forward to that. But it's a film that stayed in the subconscious. It stayed that regardless of the sequel coming out, even before then, even before it had a release date, I was just thinking and thinking about it. And I see a lot of new releases. I see a lot of new releases, and I see a lot of horror films. But I don't see a lot of horror films, new horror films that leave much of an impression on me. I think I found myself at something of a crossroads with contemporary horror, where I'm not interested in spectacle. I'm not interested in the money shot, so to speak. I don't care about, oh, this had great kills. Oh, this had a good villain. You know, I'm I'm at the I'm past the point now where a lot of contemporary horror just doesn't interest me. But I see basically just about something's got to look really bad for me not to see it. You know, I mean, there's some movies that come out where I'm like, I'm not sitting through that. It's just not for me. So I watch a lot of horror. I watch a lot of everything, but it's not too. There's really not a lot of new horror that has stayed with me like 28 Years Later has, and it's a frustrating case because it's one where I think the my issues with the film are there, and I can't get past some of the issues that I have. More so in terms of things like the ending, which I think should have been an after credit scene, leading into a trilogy that I don't think it needed to do. Not necessarily that you didn't need to make a trilogy. I'm saying that the because it's being connected to another film, it kind of is tricky for it to stand on its own with that in mind because it feels like it's setting stuff up. But these are issues that I have, but because the next fine, you know, these are just my own flaws that I have with the film. But it is one that I've just thought a lot about. And I want to mention this video as well from the user reframed, I'm sorry, on YouTube. He did a really quality video called 28 Years Later, 20, yeah, well, 28 Years Later's Old English Apocalypse. And he discusses some of the contrasts between 28 Days Later and 28 Years Later, the idea of looking back into the past, taking a modern medieval setting, how this relates to British history. Some of the stuff that was being pointed out, I didn't catch when I saw the film. I think there's a lot more going on with this film, and I think that's why I have gained. Why the more I've thought about it, the more and the more that I've really appreciated it more. Because what I'm saying before is that besides the emotional factor of the film, besides me getting something actually out of the film emotionally, where I'm actually invested in these characters, I'm invested in this world and this situation and the dangers of it. The zombies to me are so secondary. They could be anything running around, and I think that's why I end up being more interested in this and why I kind of I don't know. I'm not. If somebody doesn't like the film, it's fine, completely different. But some of the criticisms, I'm just not buying. I'm just like, I just feel like this is a film now that, how do I want to phrase this? For a mainstream kind of contemporary horror film, there's been such a glut of very disposable, very just indistinguishable films. They don't. There's nothing. There's no substance there. There's nothing going on. I mean, I see some of these, and I'm just like, man, this is. That doesn't necessarily even mean they're bad. Some of them I like. Like I said, I mean, I had a couple horror films on my list. You know, like I really liked Final Destination Bloodlines. That's a quality horror film. But I'm not walking away from that thinking about it again and again, besides the obvious of just saying like, oh, the deaths, they were big and they were outlandish. Remember this one. With 20 years later, I'm the character stuff is what I'm drawn to, and what I've said before is that I'm somebody who really likes just good, well written characters in films, and that goes into play with the first film, with 28 Days Later. And I think it's no coincidence why these two complement each other so much. You have the same writer director, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, and both these films I think follow that same kind of structure. That I guess I'm not totally sure. I mean, because to me, both of them start off as one thing, as the zombie film. But I think right off the bat, even in the first half of both of these, by setting up the characters, there's stakes right off the bat. I'm not a fan of. I guess there's probably a lot of horror films I just can't buy into. I'm not interested in just very flimsy, very one-dimensional, just shallow characters that you don't care about because you just want to see them get killed off. I don't care about that. If I wanted excitement, spectacle, I go ride a roller coaster. I want if I'm going to be sitting here for this time, I want to get something actually out of it. I want to actually have some sort of investment. And I think with both these films, I actually have that. So you have that first half, you're setting up these characters. You have this world they're living in. So that when things start to happen, there's actual consequences. When people start to go, there's actual emotion there. There's actual stakes here. It's not just a free-for-all. And then when you get to the second half, that takes such a shift away from the action, away from the horrors around them, when you're getting into the character stuff. In 28 Days Later, you have the second half with the military. You have, Cillian Murphy and all them in this compound or in this mansion, having to deal with this. And actually, the main military guy in that, I forget his name, but he, I think is it Christopher Eccleston who's in that, or Esselton? I don't know how to say his last name, but I remember he stood out. But then in 28 Years Later, when you have the second half, when it becomes quieter, it becomes more about these characters. It becomes more about something bigger than just surviving in this land. In this kind of almost time forgotten of this futuristic medieval period. Where you have these ancient kind of structures. I mean, you have in the title of the sequel, you have a bone temple, a very medieval, very archaic look to it. Whereas the contrast between that and the first film, where you have a city area, you have London, skyscrapers, tall buildings, Big Ben, and how society has regressed, not just in terms of a post-apocalyptic sort of view, but in sort of the barbarianism of it all that at the end of 28 Days Later really start to go into. And it looks like with the sequel they're going to get into as well, the idea of like these factions of a world that's already gone. In 28 Days Later's case, it's starting to go. Well, I mean, I guess it already has gone basically, but because it's seemingly so early at this point, compared to 28 Years Later, that it's on its way out. And by taking it from that big city area to this island, I think it's it feels like the natural just evolution of that, of just how far can you go before you regress. And at this point, you've regressed through centuries of time. A lot. Now, I don't want to just rephrase all this video. I do recommend looking it up if you are a fan of the film. Because I think it does provide a lot of context. A lot of the dialogue in the film I hadn't even realized was directly referencing that. One of the characters, I forgot what it was exactly, him being Swedish played into a part of it. But anyways, yeah, it's just one that, just the more I've thought about, and of course also as well, with the Jimmy Savile stuff, with you have these this group of characters modeled after the look of Jimmy Savile, and what that means. That again, that regressing. I think it's just such a well well put together film that it's a rarity for me to get something really substantial out of something contemporary like this of a film I was already looking forward to. Dana Boyle's a talented filmmaker. I think Alex Garland's a talented filmmaker as well and writer. I'd be curious to actually read his novels as well. Um, but just even outside of there being a sequel coming out, the fact that this film has been so consistently on the mind since its release in this past May, I think is a testament to the quality of it and it's an anomaly of a film. And I mean that in the most positive of ways because I just have not. Horror has been one genre I've not completely lost interest on, but I have also not had any real interest in keeping up because of incredibly diminishing returns that have has really kind of pushed me away. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic going forward because then I see a film like this and I kind of get that regained hope where I'm like, okay, there's really quality, well written films being made in the genre on a wide scale, on a mainstream scale, because I know there's plenty of good, you know, smaller indie stuff. That's fine. I'm talking about on a mainstream kind of big scale. There's been such a glut that when I see something like this, that I'm actually getting something real out of, that I'm still like kind of wrapping my head around. I think it's really a testament to the filmmaking itself. So maybe I'll come back to this conversation more when after I see the sequel for greater context. But that'll be next week when I'm able to see that at the time of this recording, of course. But I would say, and at least in 2026, it's always fun to kind of start out the year and look at not only just like a release calendar. I mean, that's one thing. You're going to recognize a lot of the movies coming out, a lot of sequels, remakes, or anything like that. But it's just the ones you you think back to the previous year, and you think back to like your favorite films, their favorite smaller films. I don't mean like, if you're a fan of like these bigger kind of filmmakers, then you're aware that, or maybe you're not aware and it's surprised you. That's okay too. But having a certain kind of expectation of what's to be released in the forthcoming year. But also, I just look at some of the titles on my list that was completely unfamiliar with at the beginning of the year, and sort of the impact that they've had since, and the ones that are just still consistently lasting, still kind of even something even I know I had a whole thing about 20 years later, but like smaller than that because I knew there was a new film coming. But I'm talking about ones that I hadn't even heard of, and I go, wow, this is really moving me, and maybe even not emotionally, maybe it's just a really exciting film or something like that, or anything like that. So every time there's a new year ahead, it is such a fun prospect of seeing what is going to just pop up of the films that you're going to hear about and go, man, I don't even know what that is. And then you see it and it has an effect on you because I think all great art has a certain kind of effect on someone, no matter how big or small that is, whether it is just, something superficial where it's just, okay, I really enjoyed this because, it had good action or it had, good scares or anything like that. And then the ones where it's long lasting. It stays with you for years and years. And I think about new films that I saw years ago, and how they've stayed and how they've just been replaying in my head. And the thing too is that if you're watching a lot of films or you're reading a lot of books or listening to a lot of music, and you're going through a lot, and you're trying to get you're trying to be like a sponge and kind of soak a lot of it in. And you have those pieces of art that really stick out, that really stay with you. That's incredibly meaningful because when I think about some of these films I'd seen a couple years ago, and I think about my own life, and I think about the changes that have come since then. I mean, even since I started the show, the changes that have come. Where I'm recording this in a completely different place than I was when I recorded a year ago. And the films I can look at that I saw last year, I'm still thinking of. And the films I saw 2 years ago and 3 years ago, and the films I've brought up and I've recommended. I think about, I just look at my collection, and so I look at some of the new films that I bought, or even I just look online. I look at my letterbox lists of like, films I saw in theaters, and I'm like, wow, I'm still, this is still so meaningful to me. And what that does to you, I think, is sort of what makes this whole thing makes just watching these films just so incredible, because you don't know. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You could walk into a film that you're like, man, I don't know what this is, or even more egregiously, you're like, man, this sounds terrible. Why? What am I don't know. And then you come out of it, and you're not the same person. Your mind has been altered. Your way of thinking has been altered. Um, Whether that's on a grand scale or that's on something smaller. Like I said before, if it's just something where it's like, man, I'm just thinking about these great action sequences, or I'm thinking about this really funny moment in the film, and or if you're thinking about something on a greater scale, where you're like, wow, I never thought of something that way. I think I'll talk about a film next time that I watched, or I rewatched, I should say, over the holiday break. That for everything that's been going on, is this film that I rewatched, I should say, where I'm like, man, that really does kind of put things into perspective and really give me a greater appreciation for my situation, for where I'm at, for the people in my life, the people who I love, and people who I talk to, and sharing art, sharing films and books and music. It just makes life so worthwhile. It makes it so great. I'm kind of rambling off, kind of going off on a tangent here. This coffee is getting just about warm, so, or maybe it's actually a little hot. It's actually not too bad. But I'll wrap it up here. I'm kind of rambling a little bit. I won't waste your time anymore. But anyways, I appreciate you guys listening. Stay warm out there. It's a little chilly in here. I got the heat on. I feel the cats are doing all right. They got plenty of winter fur on them to keep them warm. So we'll have to find our own ways to keep warm. But anyways, guys, that'll be it for this episode. Appreciate you guys listening, and until next time.